We want to learn how to do things. The higher your self-esteem, there's some very practical benefits. The higher your self-esteem, the better people will think about you. Now, your self-esteem does not come from how people think about you. That's a really poor way to do it. But the better you think about yourself, the better other people think about you, automatically. There's a subtle, silent communication going on between all people all the time. And most people will take their cue of how to think about you from how you think about yourself. There will be some people who won't let that interfere with how they think about you. But most of them will be highly dependent on your own self-perception, your own self-esteem. Because something you got to be clear about, one thing, and that is, in this life, there are going to be some people who will like you no matter what you do. Doesn't necessarily have to be parents or friends even. There's some people who are just going to like you no matter what. There will be some people who will like you depending on what you do. Yeah, so they'll use that as the measure of how they're going to feel about you. There will be some people who will not like you depending on what you do. You might be kind of neutral, but they'll really take a dislike if you do certain things. And there are going to be some people who will not like you no matter what you do. Okay? And unfortunately, sometimes that can even be parents. So while parents who like you a lot can go a long way toward helping to increase your self-esteem and making it a habit throughout your life, you don't have to be dependent on that. Because self-esteem is self-esteem. It's intended, let's say, the natural way is for it to come from you. How you think about yourself. And how you think about yourself in relation to other people and in relation to different situations and different circumstances. Because there's no such thing as just a blanket self-esteem. Sometimes in trying to work with people, they'll say, oh, well, I've got good self-esteem. Sure, under certain circumstances with certain people. But in other circumstances, with other people, you may not have it. I remember I was working with a man who was he owned a large accounting firm in the Los Angeles area. He had his offices, he had several floors of offices in a high building. His, of course, was the corner office, the power spot. And he was just had a lot of high self-esteem in relation to his work, in relation to his employees, in relation to his knowledge of what he was doing. But he brought me in for help because he had this terrible feeling of inadequacy whenever he went to social events. And in spite of his wealth, in spite of his company and all of that, whenever he was in a social event, he always felt inadequate. He felt less than the people around him. He felt something was wrong with him. Well, we eventually got him out of that, but there was this one situation which was a beautiful demonstration of what I'm saying. We were in his office working on a process when he had told people not to knock, told his employees not to come except in an emergency, and there was a knock on the door. So he called for the person to enter. It was one of his employees, and the conversation was basically like this. Mr. Z, we are having a problem with such and such an account because the client is making problems about the particular situation. We don't know what to do. So just before this happened, he was crying because of his situation in relation to other people. And he was weeping away with front of me. Door knocked, he stopped. Person came in, said that. Instant transformation. He said, well, go down the stairs, go into this file, get that file out, tell so-and-so to do this and so-and-so to do that, send that off to the client and get back to me. Yes, sir. Left. Man turned back to me. And when I'm at these parties, I don't know what to do. See? He had not learned how to take his way of behaving in that situation over to another situation. Because that's what it's all about. We all of us have skill in this area of self-esteem. We seldom think of using this skill in another place. It's like one time I had another client, completely different situation, but he had a family problem. He was a local man from Big Island. He had come over here, and as it turned out, he didn't know how to work with this family because nobody was getting along. And I knew from his conversation that he was a master mechanic. And so I said, look, why don't you go home? You're a master mechanic, right? Think of your family as a machine. Now, I'm not a master mechanic, but I just threw in a few suggestions, and I said, you know, one of the things that makes a machine run well is grease. Now, what's the equivalent for grease in your family? And then you want to make sure all the parts are running and that everything has what it needs. I said, think about these ideas. Think of yourself as a master mechanic and your family as a machine. See what happens. He called me 2 weeks later and he said, all the problems are solved. He says, I took my mechanic skill, applied it to my family, and it worked perfectly. Okay? We have this possibility. We all have areas of skill in our lives. We all have that. And when we are applying those skills, we feel good, and we feel good about ourselves, and we feel good about the skills, and whatever skill it is, you have a certain level of self-esteem when you're doing that skill. Now, a lot of people I know are immediately thinking, well, I don't have any real great skills, you know, I don't have any worthwhile to do like that. Well, wait a second. I know a lot of you are thinking, well, I've got that down. One of the things that most people are able to do in this modern world is drive a car. Most of them can, in the modern world. Those who don't drive a car usually are able to ride a bicycle. And those who don't even ride a bicycle generally are able to walk. So any one of those skills will apply to what I'm about to say. But I want you to think about this. We're going to use the example of driving a car. When you drive a car, you know, your intention is to go from point A to point B. Let's make it simple. And how do you get there? What you don't even think about most of the time is that most of the way on that trip you're going in the wrong direction. When we first start off learning how to drive a car, we're trying to keep it on the road and keep it on the right side of the line, unless we're in another country that we have to keep it on the left side. But anyway, we're driving along and we move too far this way and we start to go off and we pull it back that way, or we make a big correction, we go off that way. As we get skilled, with a lot of practice, finally we're driving with 2 fingers. Part of us is watching the scenery, having a conversation with a friend, listening to the music on the radio or the iPod, and doing very well. And how do we do that? We start to go off, we make a correction. We start to go off the other way, we make a correction. We do that so smoothly, it doesn't even seem like we're weaving. And yet, actually, most of that trip, you're going in the wrong direction. It's just that you correct so fast and so skillfully. Now, if you can apply that 2 things, the doing of it to your life and the feeling of it to your life, this is like driving a car. So it doesn't matter whether I make any mistakes. What matters is how quickly I recover.